Today, our topic is Android Lifecycle. So, throughout the session, we are trying to understand what is Android Lifecycle and what are the different methods are used to implement this Android Lifecycle for any applications built in Android Studio. So, let's start. The Android Lifecycle, which helps the developer to understand the various states that activities experiences as a user moves through an application. So when a developer built an application, so which consisting of number of activities. So now we have to understand what we have to develop, what we have to implement at each and every state of an activity. So if we understand, then we can do the right things at an appropriate time, and that leads to prevent the crashes and errors that is occurred in Android development. So in Android Studio, there exists a life cycle. So it goes through several stages, starting with the user when opening an application and closing the app. So the state of an application that enables to control when a user launches an application or make a pause, resume, stop and destroy an activity. So these status are managed using some callback methods which is inbuilt available methods in Android Studios, and these methods can be overridden to perform a specific action and provides the users with the desired outcome. So for example, if you start with any application, you can build in your mobiles. I mean, you can install in your mobiles. We listen a word activity. So what do you mean by an activity? So an activity is a single screen in an Android application. So with the help of this activity, so we can place all our user interface components or widgets in a single screen. So once you create a project in Android Studio, so it is going to create a main activity. So where we can place all our components. So that components, it may be of text views, buttons, and different widgets like scroll bars, processor bars, etc. So we can simply say activity is a place where we can place all your user interface components. For example, suppose we built one application, so which consisting of a login, register screen, home, settings, user profiles, etc. So now your application will consisting of these many of things. So it consisting login page, registration page, home page, settings page, profile page. So we can say simply each and every page is said to be an activity. So now move on to a life cycle of Android Studio. So this is a life cycle of an Android Studio, and this figure will show you the entire life cycle of an Android Studio. So once your application or your activity is launched and it is going to be destroyed, like we are going to shut down our activity. So in between, your life cycle is going to be existed. So we have 6 main callback methods or stages. We can simply say as a life cycle stages. for an Android activity. So what are that 6 stages? Like we have on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So the system will invoke each of these callbacks when an activity enters a new state. So like your activity is moving from one state to another state, and these callback methods are called. See, you can observe this diagram. So like we have methods like on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, on destroy, and here we have an on restart method. And here these three methods will cause your activity is in running state. So once you pause your activity, it doesn't be destroyed. It is going to be run at background. So you can observe that. So you already having some experience with your mobiles. Like you are trying to open one application. So it is launched in your mobile itself. Now you are going to move one activity to another activity and you are doing some work. So in middle of that, you are getting a call or you are getting some message in your mobile. So what simply we are doing? So at current application, we have to make it pause and we come up with phone call or messages. So at that time, our application is not destroyed. So it is going to be run at background. So that state we can simply call it as on pause. So once you completely clear your application from your mobile, so then your app is getting destroyed. So as of that, your app is not destroyed. It is going to be run at background. So try to understand this life cycle first. Then we'll move on all these methods. When we call this method, what is going to be happen in Android Studio in brief. So when your activity is launched in your mobile, before it is getting started, so the system is automatically calls your on create method. And this on create method is shortly call your on start method. And it calls your on resume method. So at this on resume method will makes your application will be in inactive state and you can see all your components and everything is loaded and you are ready to operating with that and you are ready to use that activity. So that will be a state of on resume. So once you see your application on foreground, when it is ready to operate, so now you can observe that these three methods are called one after another. And now your activity is running after we are calling this on resume method. Suppose if you are calling another activity from another application, so what's happening? So another activity, it comes into the foreground. So now your running app is going to be backend. So now it immediately calls your on pause method. So at this state, we can't see the currently running application. So because we are making another activity to foreground. So at that state, the previous activity is back. So we can't see that activity. And this on pause method will called the on stop. So the activity is finishing or being destroyed by the system. So now it calls on destroy. So on stop method will make your apps with a higher priority. It needs memory. So app process is going to be killed, and again user navigates to the activity. So then it again calls your on create method, on start and on resume method to make your applications to run. And this on stop stage you can also call on restart method. So on restart method will again calls your on start and on resume method will makes your activity to running state. So when this on restart method will called, suppose if you are at home page, from that home page you are choosing one option. So you are moving that home page to another activity. So again from that activity you are completing your work, and again you are trying to come back to the home page. Suppose for example again you are navigating to the previous page. So instead of reloading your application, so it is going to be restart your previous activity. So in terms it again calls your on start and on resume method to make that activity into running state. So this is whole about Android lifecycle with all these methods. So now we'll discuss each and every stage in brief. So we'll start with on create method. So this is your on create method. So on create method is having O is small and C is capital letter. So it is a first method called when we launch an activity from a home page. So it is a default callback method that is automatically created when we are creating a new activity. So Android Studio is automatically calls this create method. So when it is called, so your Android Studio is creating a main activity.java file. So this class will consisting an on create callback method by default. So it is called only once in a life cycle of Android. So we cannot create more than one time in a life cycle of activity. Like we can create only once. Once it is launched into your mobile, then only your app is getting created. So this method called only once in a life cycle. So once a user opens the application, the life cycle, it starts and the activity is brought to the foreground. Now you can see once your application is launched into your mobile. So you can see your application on foreground. So in this case, onCreate is immediately calls to fire up the application, and it may contains the components such as the activity of UI. Suppose for example, you consider a login screen. So what do you mean by a components? In your login screen, you are finding email and password, and after that you are finding one button with sign in option, and again you have some other options like you can log in with your Google account or Facebook account or Twitter account like that. So those are the components of your activity. Those are the user interface components of your activities. So once you launch your application, so now your application may consisting of all such components. And in this case, our activity is not yet visible, so we cannot see after we are launching. So because it is going to call automatically your on start and resume method, and after that only we can see all your components on your screen. So it remains in a state until the on create function finishes, then quickly moves to the next state, that is on start state. So in this on start state, So here also S is capital and O is small. So when an application is started, so the system will invoke this onStart method. So after your launching your application, so now it is getting started. So this callback is invoked to make the activity visible to the user. Now you can see after onStart method is started, then you can see your application on your mobile. So onStart can be called several times during an application of Android lifecycle. But create method is called only once. So for example, this method can be called when a user opens another activity and then navigate back to the previous activity. So when you, I already said, like your application is having many activities like your registration screen or login screen, home page will consisting some options, and again you have a user profile, settings, sign out option, all these things, right? So now everything is nothing but an activity. Now you are moving in application from one activity to another activity. So for that state, it is going to, now we are navigating one activity to second activity. Again you are opening the second activity, it will be in on start state, right? Because it is not created, because once you launched your application, so every page of your application is loaded into your system, so we cannot create the number of times. So it will start your activity, and after this the onStart method is called an onResume method immediately, and every component associated with the activity is brought to the foreground state. And this state is now considered as interactive. So now everything is visible to you. Now you can see your login page, and there you can find out your email text box and your password text box, and you can see your login button and everything. So now you can start interaction with your app. And at this point, the activity remains in the foreground state unless something happens to your application. So this may include the interaction from other applications such as some phone call, or some user will navigate from one activity to another activity. So until, so we are seeing the same screen on your mobile at this state. And after that we have an on pause state. So this is called when user switches to another activity or multi-window mode application. So what do you mean by a multi-window mode application? Suppose, see for example, in our mobile, so we are opening one WhatsApp application and we are trying to chat with our friends. So parallelly, we are listening some music from Geo7 or something. So now you can find out that at the same time we are going to operate with two different applications. One is WhatsApp and the second one is your Geo7. So here we are chatting and there we are going to listen the music. So now what you are trying to do in the middle of we chatting with friends, like we are going to your Geo7 app and we are trying to change the song. So that is a multi-window, like we are moving from one app to another app. So those are not activities. Those are two different applications. So at that time, the activity has lost focus, is running in the background. Yes, obviously. So now what we are doing, we are minimizing the WhatsApp app, and again we are restart your Geo7, and now we are trying to change the song. So at that time your WhatsApp app is not visible to you. So we don't have any focus on that. So it is not destroyed. So simply it is run at background. So this callback will pause the activity and release some resources, that is the activity was consuming, and all unrequired operations are paused. So when this on pause method is called, so the activity is going to release some of the resources that activity was consumed, because those resources are not at all required when you are pausing your application or when you pause your activity. So remember, on at on pause stage, your system will release some resources on the activity, so which is not used at that pausing state. And after that we have on stop method. So at this point, and most of the activity process have been stopped. However, this activity is still running in the background. So before it is destroyed, so your application is completely removed from running state. So now this on stop state will make your applications to stop for some time, and this life cycle usually occurs after on pause method. So once you make your application is going to be run at background, so now we stop working with that, we stop running with that. So at that time the on pause method is automatically calls your on stop method is executed due to the user is switching from one activity to another activity or pressing the home button. So in such situations, it is used to release the heavy resources and stop in intensive operations that are not required while an activity is invisible. So at this time, this activity is not destroyed yet, and the activity instances are saved in batch stack, and this means all the states are still active, including the views. So when a user opens it again, the application will not reload the instances. Instead, it will retrieve them from memory. And this include all your user interface components such as the text views and everything. And after that, from on start method, we can do two things. Either we can destroy, because you are not making your application is going to be run for a longer time. So we pause your application, and after that there will be of two chances, like either you can restart your activity and again you can start working with that, or else you can destroy your application, or else you can close your application. So closing application is nothing but destroying. So now at this time from on stop we can call either two methods. One is on restart or on destroy method. Suppose again you are interested, means after you are changing your song from Geo 7, again your tap on this WhatsApp activity, and again you are continue with your chatting. So now what's happened, it immediately calls the on restart method. So this on restart method can be called when a user restarts the activity. So this means activity will go back to the main screen and the user can resume interacting with the components. So on create function is called only once in activity lifecycle. When on restart method is executed, the activity will resume by executing the start and on resume method. It doesn't call again on create. So on create method is called only once your application is launched into your mobile. And once you restart, it doesn't create your activity again. It is reload your activity so that it will call only two methods like on start and on resume. And after we are getting this on resume method, then only we can see your application is or your activities in interactive stage. And the next thing is on destroy method. So this is a final callback method in your activity life cycle. So this is received after we call the stop method. So I already mentioned after the stop method is called, like you are pausing your application. So there is two possibilities. Either you can restart or you can delete your, we can't say like delete. So we can close your application. So this method is called when there is a change in the configuration state such as screen rotations or language settings, and the Android system will destroy the activity, then recreate it with a set configurations. So now simply we can say like, so this destroy method is called once you delete your application from your mobile. So after, it is completely destroying, means we are completely removing your activity or application. So then it is going to call the destroy method. So I took this uh, topic from this portal. So section.io/engineering education. So that person is provided very good explanation on Android lifecycle. So we'll move on to the practical session. So in previous classes, you already learned how to create a project in Android Studio and how to run and everything you already know. So here we'll see this life cycle part, how you are going to implement the life cycle, Android life cycle in Android Studio. That is our today practical part. So now see, so I'm created one project and my project name is my application 3. And after we are creating, so here I'm created my project with an empty activity. So we know that once you see here like this, so new project. So here you can have many activities. So for this project I'm taking empty activity. So I just click on next. So now you can see here it is ask you the project name. So whatever the name you are provided and that is given for your application. So you can change it like suppose if I'm taken like app like life cycle, mean Android life cycle. So you can use a camel case. Android life cycle, suppose you can consider like this. Now you can see it will be saved. So for me it is saved uh, in HP Android Studios project. So there my project is saved, and here you can find out Android lifecycle too, because I have already one project with Android lifecycle. Because of that it will give me another number. I mean it is exceeding with this number. So otherwise for you can see you can find out the same name here also. And here I have two options. I can implement my background either Java or Kotlin, and here I'm using Java. And this is a minimum SDK we have to choose. So depends on this SDK levels. So the number of users is going to use your application is going to be changed. So it is better to take a minimum SDK is 21, so that your application is going to be used by 98%. It almost 99% of the Android devices is going to deploy your application and they can use. So now you just click on this finish button. So now you can see here. So your Gradle, it start building. So now you can see after you're creating your project, you are finding two different files here. Activity main.xml and the second one is main activity.java. So this is your activity main XML. So by this XML you can see your designing part and everything, and here you have an option like code split and design. So by this option you can find out only the code, And split, you can find out both code and the designing part. See here, the designing part, and by design you can see only the design part. So you can choose a split part so that you can identify once you make some changes in your coding and what you are getting in your interface also. So in this way I'm created my project. So now you can observe that in main activity.java. So here in my project, so os.bundle, so this package is already imported, and now you can find out this main activity is extended from app compact activity, and here by default you are finding an onCreate method. So now this onCreate method is having a save instance state. And now we are extending this main activity.java, try to understand the concept of life cycle of an Android. For that, here I am illustrating the project. With two methods like log.d and toast. So here I am going to use log.d. So here you can find out a log cat at the bottom of your application. So once you click on this, once you run your app, so what is going to be happen, you can find out here. So here I'm created empty activity. So now you can find out this by this log.d. So d is nothing but a debugging. So once you run your application, so at the time of running your application, what it happens, everything you can see on this logcat. So it will take two arguments. The log.d method will take two arguments. Like it will take the tag name. So like where you are running your application, and it is going to show you some message. So this is a user defined. So what you are given in between this double quotation, so it is going to be displayed on your logcat. So I'll show you a little bit later. So now you can see here the toast. So the toast.makeText method will take three arguments. Now you can see here the toast makeText method will take three arguments. One is the context, and the second one is the message, that is a text what you are going to display as a toast, and it is going to take a third argument as like length, short, long. Like we have two things, like how much time, like you want to toast your message for a short time or for a long time. So that is going to be taken by this argument, and we have a show method. So now you're using this. So here on create method, so I simply given a message like the main activity is created. So we have to override all the methods, like see here, after on create we have on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, on restart, and on destroy. So these are the inbuilt methods. So now we have to override these methods. So every method means here you can see your main activity is extended from app compact activity. So now this activity is having, this is a parent for your main activity. So now this main activity is extended from this. So now what are the inbuilt functions we have? We have to use all the inbuilt functions in your main activity, and we are overriding the definition of those inbuilt functions. So for that, here we are using the override method. Override. So here we have to take a protected void onStart. So onStart is a method, void is a return type, and we can use this as a protected. So protected is an access specifier. So what we are doing, simply we can use super dot onStart. So once you take your onStart method, it is going to give you a super dot onStart method. So now I'm adding these two. Now you can see these two statements are similar in all methods, but only the contents are different. So log.d is going to take two things like uh, the tag part, like where we are running this, and the second is the message is going to be displayed at logcat, and the toast make text is always taking of these three arguments, like we can give a context and this main activity dot this. So at that time when your activity is run, so at that time the message is going to be displayed for a short period of time by using this show method. So now you can find on resume, super dot on resume. So this is by default method you are finding. So once your application is resuming, so now you're going to toast this message on your mobile. And after that we have on pause method. So here also we just shown in log like activity called on pause method, and we want to toast the message like main activity is paused. For similarly for on stop, on restart and on destroy methods are overridden in this project. So now you can see main activity is resumed, main activity is paused, main activity is stopped, and main activity is restarted, and it is destroyed. So when these methods are called in lifecycle of Android, so once you launch, means after once you run your application, so now your application is going to be launched in your mobile. So this is my emulator. So here I'm using, this is Pixel 2 API 30 is my emulator. So for your laptop, you have your emulator which is created for your Android Studio. And once you run this application, so what's happening? Simply your app is going to be installed in your mobile. That is nothing but launching of your application. So at that time you can find out this on create you're finding on the screen. And once you get started your application, now it is ready state. So now it will display you a main activity started. And after this activity started, now it's time to see all your components in your activity. So now you can find out the on resume activity is called. So after that, if I minimize my application, now I'm finding this on pause state, and it automatically calls the on stop stage. So now you can see once I'm launching this application into my mobile, you can see very quickly this on create, on start and on resume methods are called. So once you see your interface on your mobile, and when I pause, when I minimize my application, you can find out this on pause method automatically calls the on stop method. Again I maximize my screen. So again I make it my app to work. So now you can find the on start method, and this on start method will automatically calls start method and resume method. It cannot call any create method, right? because our app is not destroyed, so it is still running at my background, so it cannot reload or recreate the application. Just it will load the things from a memory, so that it will call create and resume method to again make your application to active state, and it is going to be interacted with the user. And this on destroy method, so once I close my application, now you can see the on destroy method is called. At that time it will show you a message like main activity is destroyed. So here I'm going to run my application, and here you can see after you're creating your app and you are doing all these things. So here you are finding your app is there, and here you are finding your emulator. So just click on run. So after running of your application, if you make again any changes in your code, no need to run again. You have to use this. That will make the changes and it will restart your activity. Again, it doesn't reinstall the activity into your mobile. So for that you can use this. For the first time I'm going to run this application, I can use the run method. So now run app. So now you can see here Gradle build is running. And after finishing of this, you can see here launch succeed. So my application is launched in my mobile. My application is installed in this mobile. So you can find out here these three methods are called on create, on start, and on resume methods. So now I minimize this. Now you can see your activity is paused and stopped. So again I maximize this. So again you see the main activity started and resumed. And here I am trying to close my app. So it will show me like your activity is destroyed. So I'll show you one more time. So I'll just again run this. So now see activity is created, started, and resumed. So now you can see your application here. And you can see before I'm clicking anything, so your application is still in interactive state only. So nothing will happen. So it will be available on your foreground, and you can see you can do anything with this activity. So if I make it as to minimize this application, now you can see the on pause method is called, and it immediately calls your on stop method. So here so now you can see here it is resumed. So if I close this, so you can find out your application is destroyed. So this is a life cycle of an Android. So this topic is very important because when you are build some applications, so sometimes we need to save a few things in your application before we are going to destroy it. So for that, if you understand these life cycle and each and every state what is going to be happen, then only we can do the proper coding in our application, will make to fulfill the requirements of that